Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I see myself in the corner, and let me check my sound, and I'm sorry, I always forget the sound at the very end, but I remember it as soon as I come on because people say bad things to me when it's low. Alright, so I am up. You know, I don't know my political range in this case, like how many people view me from how many people float between the sides, meaning whatever the political spectrum is, whatever that esoteric political spectrum is, and how those people vote along the political spectrum. But to the degree that I float between the sides, and to the degree that that information flows back and forth, I would like to make a proposal that if nothing else, we should agree that corruption should not be a part of politics. Meaning, it's one thing to have an ideological debate and you have two sides where the people are being earnest and honest in the conversations that they're having to solve things and to get things done and government actually working. It's another thing when the reasons and the motivations that the people take on has nothing or little to do with what goes on in the public will. The public doesn't want it. They behave as if they're this kind of rogue entity of sorts. The case that I make here is, if I make a contention, Democrats don't care about the poor and Republicans don't care about the deficit. Now these two things are connected because the point I'm going to make here is, if that's true, if that's any degree that's true, if I can make that case, and I can show to any measure of clarity that that is a true statement, Democrats don't care about the poor, Republicans don't care about the deficit, that the arguments that these parties have been making for the past 40, 50 years have for the most part been a farce. It's been a farce. If it's been a farce, then what has it been a farce for? Why? Why would a party need to come up with a farce in such a way? Why would they need to come up with something that they fundamentally don't necessarily believe in if you're not functioning at the behest of the public itself? To whose behest are you functioning? I think that's a fair question. I'm making this point that if that is true, the come on. There we go. Whose behest are they acting? Why are they putting on a mask when they're interacting with the public in this way? Why are they just making shit up? For whose whims are they making shit up for? If it's not for the public, who is it for? That's my point. Should politics, should governing be at the behest of the 99%, meaning the majority of the population, or should it be at the behest of one? If you're being honest, that answer is easily that should be at the behest of the 99%. Government is not this edifice to be taken over by corporate and plutocratic interests to be harnessed as a bat to use against the public itself. If on the left and the right, but on the left and the right in the sense of people who actually believe in real things, not these functionaries of the parties that go with the public will, but on the left and the right, if I am right, and if these guys are just putting on a facade, can we agree that the reason why they're doing those things is for clear interests, meaning you're getting paid to do a particular task and they're doing that task, and that task is usually against the public in many respects, and the facade that they use to make that task okay is whatever their political values that they've come up with, these things, that these principles that they hold so tightly and so dearly. When Obama was in office, Obama enshrined 80-something, almost 90% of those Bush tax cuts, those ghastly Bush tax cuts, enshrined those things into law. Democrats bitched and moaned about those Bush tax cuts. But when Obama enshrined those things into law, they said that was a tax increase. They called it a tax increase. Look, I'm making this point that Democrats are not opposed to taxes or tax cuts, and the way that they're behaving as if, you know, this Trump thing is the first time this has ever taken place. It hasn't. The last Republican president did the exact same thing. And the Democratic president behind him said, okay, we're going to make this permanent. We're going to instantiate these things into law. When the banks went belly up, this progressive lefty president who, in the Democratic Party, this idea of workers, people, and all this other stuff, this guy let homeowners go belly up while at the exact same time protecting bankers. Who do you represent? Who do you represent? I would say I don't necessarily care what you say. I care what you do in this respects. And if the things that you're doing is showing a complete tilt to one side of the political spectrum, just because you're giving lip service to the other doesn't necessarily mean you're supporting that other. One policy after the other, Democrats cast themselves as a party of labor, the party of the little guy, essentially the lefties. The lefties. These lefties have attacked unions, or at very least have stood by while unions were being decimated. These lefties have put out NAFTA policy, these trade deals, these things that allowed union or weakens the power of labor. Labor hates these things. They do it anyway. There is no representation in government that represents actual labor or represents the 99%. The moment that the Democratic Party made the Faustian bargain of saying, yes, I will take this cash, and I would be a little bit least worse than the other party. I'm not going to bring up class. I'm not going to bring up class. We're going to be least worse than the other party. If you're functioning at the behest of the 99%, the actual thing, the operative term that you need to bring up is class. You hugged identity in a way that was somewhat slightly disgusting. It's not that protecting identity is a bad thing. It's that you've weaponized it. Meaning, we are going to hug these every darkie that we can find, every queer that we can find, because ultimately we're going to double down on identity because we can't have the conversation about economics. That's a political stunt. That's a political gimmick. That's no real fire. There's no real belief system there. That's purely, we're going to use identity because now that we're taking so much cash, we can't have certain conversations about economics. The conversations that would actually need to be had if you were actually representing that demographic. I don't care about your big tent. If you have this big tent where you have that snarly plutocrat that was on MSNBC, if that guy is in your tent and that guy is telling you to shut up about class, then guess what? You're not representing class interests. You're not representing class interests. There's a myriad of ways that you could have gone about dealing with poverty, dealing with work, all this stuff. One instance after the next, you let those things go to the wayside. When you guys had absolute power, when Obama first got elected, unions wanted you to pass the law. What is it called? Free elections or essentially a bill that would allow unions to form far more easier and protected unions. You passed that aside, completely ignored it, and going beyond ignoring it, pushed for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, NAFTA on steroids. One policy after the next has gone to undermine and destroy the base that the Democratic Party says it represents. That is an amazing fucking thing for a party to look at its base and say you have nowhere else to go because these other guys are rabid. That's a political stunt. That's a political stunt. They understand that for the most part the left has this lineage to this kind of FDR thing. So yeah, they're going to say whatever they need to say about the poor. They're going to be pretty flamboyantly progressive when they're in opposition, when they don't necessarily have to live up to the things that they're saying. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they don't care about those things. Those things are means for them to get elected. They need to take a massive amount of cash. They need to parrot a few lines from the progressive part. And they need to get across here that Republicans are rabid and insane. And that even though, yes, we are to the right, we're not as right as them. I'm saying that's a stunt. That's a game. These guys are being paid off to take a position. This is the mask that they wear in order to get those particular people to vote for them. We're being played as useful idiots. And the Republicans know better. And if nothing, this tax plan, I would say, gets that across better than anything else. And one plan that these guys have to pass, and look, this is Trump supporters or Republican supporters. You need to explain this to me. In one situation after the next, Donald Trump, I'm going to make America better. I'm going to make America great again. This kind of dog whistle campaign thing. But fair enough. Everybody didn't necessarily hit a dog whistle. Some people looked at it and it says, this guy says he's talking about workers. He's talking about jobs. He's shaming businesses because those businesses are going to send jobs overseas. I've never heard a Democrat do that. I've never heard a Democrat do that. It might have been posing. You might have called it theatrical. Call it whatever you want. You had a president of the United States shaming companies because they were talking about shipping those jobs overseas. He was full of it, yes. but he did it. That's the point. He did it. You understand that part of the reason that what he's promising them, though, and if you think back to the campaign, one promise after the next, Trump was running as a lefty. He gets in office. No, you're not going to have everyone is going to have health care. I'm going to get rid of 20-something million people off the health care rolls by passing Trump care. I'm going to do the exact same thing now with the tax bill in order to gut Obamacare in a different way. That doesn't sound like supplying big, beautiful health care to everybody to me. That sounds like he's trying to gut services in order to give tax cuts to the wealthy and the people who don't need it. Now, I know there's some Trump supporters who don't care about this. But I know there are others who aren't necessarily ideologically bent in that particular way. And they're part of this demographic of Republicans who says, yes, you need to raise taxes on the corporations and the rich. Yes, you need to do that. Lower them on the middle class, but you need to raise them on the rich. If you're part of that demographic, certainly you can see that there's something wrong with the Republican Party who screamed at the top of their lungs that they can't raise the deficit by 1 iota. By 1 penny, 1 red cent. I would bleed on the flag before I put 1 more red cent on the back of my grandkids. This is the stuff these guys were saying. The moment Donald Trump gets elected, they put $9 trillion on the deficit. These guys who are willing to bleed on the flag all of a sudden raise the deficit by $9 trillion. Explain to me these deficit hawks. How are these deficit hawks raising the budget by $9 trillion? How are they going to put $1.5 trillion of debt to redistribute an income further to the top? You need to explain to me, how is this caring about the deficit? How is this caring about the deficit? Explain this to me. They're willing to give their own constituency more and put that money on the deficit, on the debt itself. That doesn't sound like somebody who cares about the debt. It sounds like they care massively about the debt when they're out of power and they want to constrain Democrats, whatever Democrats are going to do. Democrats are going to raise the deficit. They're going to blow a hole in the deficit because they're going to want to pay for some social program. We don't want them to raise 1 red cent. The deficit is a scam. It's a scam. It's a thing that they use to constrain the other party. It has nothing to do with reality. In the same way that they were willing to raise the deficit by $9 trillion. In the same way George Bush, in this expensive fucking war, killing all of these people from Americans and Iraqis, they didn't care about the debt. This stuff is political gamesmanship. This is stuff that they use in order to scam the public into getting these positions. They don't care about these positions. This is all boils down to one thing. These people pay me. They give me cash. This cash isn't necessarily given for a campaign donation. It's given as an investment. At some point, I'm going to be in a position to lower his taxes. I don't care about these social programs. Lower my taxes. And when you blow a hole in deficit, you're going to turn around and say, oh my God, there's a hole in the deficit. We need to cut social programs. We need to cut social programs. There's a hole in the deficit. We need to pay our way. We can't necessarily have people having these entitlements. This is a scam. This scam has been played going back always since Ronald Reagan. This is a scam. Both of these parties are scamming you. Both of these parties are scamming you for the same reason, because they don't believe in these things. Ultimately, what they believe in is getting elected. And in order to get elected, they take massive amounts of cash. And they bend a particular way in taking that massive amounts of cash. Bernie Sanders broke the mold in this. And he broke the mold in this for a very particular reason. He wasn't beholden to their interests. Now, I went long, but there's a very specific point that I'm getting at. If these guys are lying to you, which I propose they are, and if this Republican tax plan doesn't get across this thing of, A, they don't care about deficits, and B, the thing that they care about is obvious. Lowering the taxes of the people who are giving them cash. It's a revolving door. You scratch my back when you're in government, I'll scratch your back when you get out of government. This is obvious. This is clear. Like, this is one of those things of the amount of cash that these guys are getting. And you can look and say, what the public wants has nothing to do with the political process at all. Ultimately, what has to do with the political process is the people who are putting money in their pockets. They spend the overwhelming majority of their time asking for cash. And then asking for that cash, what do you think they're doing for the cash? You understand that 90-something% of the people who run in elections with the most cash wins. And if you understand that, what are you going to do? You're going to do what you need to do to get the cash. Do you believe that if you screw over the interests of somebody who gave you that cash, that A, you're going to get that cash again, and B, that cash is not going to be used punitively against you? The system is awash in cash. The system is fundamentally corrupt. And I'm saying the left and the right, if nothing else, if there is no other agreement on anything else, you can hate my guts in every other respect, but at the very least, if you're earnest and honest with yourself, you would say that the political apparatus in no way should be flushed with corruption. I want to show a video. It's short. It's not that long. But it gets across this thing that, you know, there were other times in American history where this was bitterly corrupt, and it changed. It changed to a small degree, but it changed. The difference here is any change that you make at this point, we need to get beyond this existential thing of back and forth in this stuff. If you're going to get in office and you're going to take power, you need to instantiate your gains where those things can't be rolled back in these cartoonish ways that the Republicans go about this stuff. This is Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt had the name of Trustbuster. And he had that name of Trustbuster because he actively took on the interest in using government as a club, in a sense of saying, you guys are going to be under the law. Your power, your special interest and the money that you have is not going to be part of this political process where you're going to just bribe government in this way. And he ran anti-corruption campaigns, smashing one trust after the next, or one monopoly after the next. Let's take a look. I loved this video because it gave a look. Whatever Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy is for the moment, put it to the side. This is very specific and contextual to what I'm talking about here. Let's take a look.
His first day in office was also his father's birthday. I have realized it as I sign various papers all day long, he said, and I feel that it is a good omen, as if my father's hand were on my shoulder. His father had set the highest possible standards: duty to those less fortunate, principle before self-interest, strength in the face of fear. Now, as president, he would try to act on those old-fashioned principles in a world very different from the one his father had known. At stake would be the power of the presidency itself and the welfare of ordinary Americans everywhere. By the turn of the century, America had been transformed from a rural republic into a mighty industrial power. The benefits to the country were enormous. But those who did the everyday work of building the new America did not fully share in those benefits, and their anger was growing. Vast fortunes were being made by the men who controlled American industry. They were not regulated by government. There were no restraints on their power. Roosevelt saw it as his duty to try to head off the violent confrontation he feared was coming.
He thought that the rich were making too much, the lower classes were making too little. He feared that the long-term consequence of this would be a social revolution.
These fools on Wall Street think they can go on forever, Roosevelt told a reporter. They can't. I would like to be the buffer between their foolishness and the wrath that is surely to come. Sooner or later, there will be a riotous, wicked, murderous Day of Atonement. Within just 5 months of taking office, Roosevelt acted to stave off that day. He struck without warning at the single most powerful financier in America, J. Pierpont Morgan. Morgan was an international investment banker who could command resources worth more than all the gold and silver in the United States Treasury, almost 10 times what the federal government spent each year. Under his piercing gaze, one observer said, the boldest man was likely to become timid. There seemed to radiate something that forced the complex of inferiority upon all around him.
I think that part is absolutely hilarious because people respond that way now. There's nothing being exerted, dude. That's you feeling inferior because he has more money than you. The money is not real. It has nothing to do with his character. It has nothing to do with what he is as a person. It has nothing to do with his morals, his values, or anything else. He was able to do a stupid human trick. And that superhuman trick, in this particular reality context, gave him a lot of cash. That's it. There's no quality of individual there in that sense. Like, it's not, you know, this is such a man. He's such a man that I feel inferior to. That's purely coming from the individual that's talking. It just sounds funny. Let's keep going. There's another part of this I want to talk about also afterwards. This idea of, he looked at it as, look, this society is going to collapse at some point. It's going to implode on itself. You're going to have a violent revolution if you keep taking from, essentially, if you keep extorting, or extorting is the wrong word, exploiting the middle class, or exploiting the people in the country itself. You're hoarding all of this wealth. The guy had 10 times, he could command 10 times as much as the United States government spent. Think about that. That's fucking amazing. That's fucking amazing. Let's take a look. Let's keep a look at what takes place. Because I think this is somewhat, it's an emblematic time in our history that we look at it as being so impossible, so out of touch. This, you know, it's like the maniacs or the kids with the matches in this case. Your government has gotten away from you. Man, there's nothing I can do with the government that's gotten away from me. That's not fully true. I don't necessarily go with this idea of this great man theory of this. I don't think anybody is just going to spring up and just start beating down government in this way, or beating down these forces in this way. That's kind of pried its fingers into the state apparatus. That's come from below. That has to come from below. We were lucky at some point to get a Teddy Roosevelt, at least in this very specific capacity of going after trust in this way, of going after monopolies in this way, and kind of exerting this authority over, no, I don't care how much money you have, you're subordinate to the will of the United States. The laws apply to you. It would have to come from below. That's my point. I would make the case that I made somewhat of a decent case of saying these parties don't care about the things that these parties say they care about, which means what are the values that these parties actually have? And I would make the case that the values boil down to we are taking cash and we're doing favors, and I would say that the things that they care about in government, the things that they do in government, it doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to you. Why is that okay? Why is that acceptable? And why is that one of those things where we just look at it and says, it's just that way? Be outraged. Be pissed off. Don't be complacent. Meaning, don't get to the point where you think that this is just the normal operation of government. I don't care what the normal operation of government is. If I'm going to get this idea of this is an edifice, and if anything is going to change in this society, that edifice needs to be captured, then you need to come up with this way, left and right. There are things that we can argue about, there are things that we can bitch about, but I would guarantee you a conversation on ideology against people who actually have ideologies, at least in this capacity, will get you to places that these fixed positions won't. Your government is seized up and your government doesn't work, and I would say your government is going rogue. And I would say if any of this is going to change at all, it's going to take a groundswell of people on the left and the right saying, we may disagree on a lot of other shit, but at the very least our government shouldn't be full of corrupt criminals. Let's keep going.
In industry after industry, Morgan had combined hosts of small companies into giant monopolies. Trusts, United States Steel, International Harvester, General Electric, all under the financial control of just this man. Trusts like Morgan's dominated American life at the turn of the century. They manipulated prices, destroyed competition, bought and sold politicians.
There is a great deal of public discontent. Middle-class people, small businessmen, working people are really getting bothered by this. They believe the trusts are controlling their lives. They believe that they're paying them low wages. And they believe that they're just taking too big a share of the national pie.
The trusts had long been close.
Think about that. They think they're taking too big of a share of the national pie. Well, that's interesting. What do you think the national pie was back then? The last president, 95% of the wealth went to the top 1%. And are you giving me shit because I'm trying to have this conversation about class? It's like, don't say anything about class, but you've been attacked for the past 50, 60 years. It's fucking amazing. 95% of the wealth. It was not 95% of the wealth at that point. There's no way it was 95% of the wealth at that point. This wealth number is the most in the United States history that Obama gave to the wealth to the top 1%. And during this period of time, people were getting pissed off. It wasn't 95%. It wasn't 95%. We were immensely complacent. Let's keep going.
Allied with Roosevelt's own Republican Party. But the new president had earned his reputation as a reformer.
These guys were very worried about Roosevelt. Roosevelt has showed himself already to be a maverick and a kind of uncontrollable force. He's not going to go along with business as usual. They look on him as kind of a time bomb. I mean, they just do not know what he's going to do.
One of J.P. Morgan's trusts controlled the major railroad lines in the Pacific Northwest. Called Northern Securities, it symbolized everything people hated and feared about the trusts. They stifled competition, charged exorbitant prices, concentrated too much power in the hands of Wall Street. Roosevelt ordered his Attorney General to break up the monopoly and restore competition. He brought an antitrust suit against Northern Securities, charging it was an illegal combination in restraint of trade. J.P. Morgan was stunned.
He has been very used to getting inside information from Washington, and in fact, Washington has sought his advice on most of what it has done in economic and business matters. And all of a sudden, here's a president who isn't asking his advice and who prosecutes him as a criminal. And Morgan is just beside himself. He comes right down to Washington with a couple of his lawyers and advisors and brings a couple of friendly senators into the White House and says to Roosevelt, "Why didn't you warn me?" Roosevelt says, "Warning you was just what we didn't want to do." Then Morgan says, "If we've done anything wrong, why don't you just send your man," meaning the Attorney General, "to my man," meaning his own lawyer, who was often called his Attorney General. "Just send your man to my man and we'll fix it up."
Roosevelt responded, "That cannot be done." The point for him was that nobody, no interest, no private interest can presume to be the sovereign equal of the U.S. government. No tycoon can be the equal of the President of the United States.
Roosevelt, with a brilliant sense of symbolism and timing, establishes right off the bat that he's going to be in charge here, that he's in effect waving his big stick in the face of these Wall Street plutocrats and saying, "I'm running this country, you're not."
The struggle continued in the courts for more than 2 years. In the end, Morgan's Railroad Trust was broken up, and Roosevelt went on to prosecute other unpopular trusts: sugar, oil, beef, tobacco. But in spite of the headlines he made as a trust buster, he left most of the giant monopolies untouched.
This guy was a Republican. Now, can you imagine the indignity of the Democratic president after having been paid a ton of money in the campaign by Wall Street, going down to Wall Street and saying, "I'm standing between you and the pitchforks"? Well, of course you are. We gave you the money to stand between me and the pitchforks. Yeah, that was the point of us paying you. That is mind-blowing, the idea that there was a president that would do that. There are none in my political memory or political history of the A, that was that courageous, or B, that was that untethered to that financial interest, where they would have the balls to even bring stuff like that up. I don't think you're going to get that president. I don't think you're going to get that person. You're not going to be that lucky to get somebody who does that specific thing, who's that specific focus on. Something needs to fundamentally change in the way we organize ourselves in a society. And if that means breaking up corporate interests and breaking up this idea of corruption and weeding out corruption in government itself, then that's what should be done. And if that means joining with the left on and the right on this, I would say if nothing else, if you're functioning with a level of integrity regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, the last thing you want in your government is corruption. Even if you lose in the debate itself, the last thing you want is corruption. So that is my pitch. I don't necessarily know how to effect anything dealing with that, but I think it's true. I mean, I just feel like if anything you're going to get done, you're going to have to get it done through the edifice of government itself. Meaning you need to find some way to push. I would imagine if you had someone on the right, and there will be people on the right who are anti-war, who don't necessarily like this idea of corruption, and in the same way like you, thinks it's fundamentally corrupt. There's a reason why people went towards Sanders and Trump. There were two outliers. They were fundamentally different than what was there before. At least Sanders was. Trump was just a Republican. So, let's see. Neither party cares about the young generation. Tax bill kills millennials, but they always talk about loving the kids. Pillbox, yes, that's my point. This stuff isn't real. George Papag, if you have legalized bribery in politics, you don't have democracy. That's my point. Everything else parties say or do is just semantics. That is my point. That's my point. This is political gamesmanship. Republicans are rabid. Democrats are like, yes, they're so rabid. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to represent unions. We don't have to represent the poor. We don't have to represent the middle class. They can take out one edifice that supports us, meaning unions being one of the major backers of Democrats, and Democrats letting it be obliterated. Let it go by the wayside. They didn't let it go by the wayside willy-nilly. This is kind of the point, and this is important. They let it go by the wayside because in their mind we have a big tent, and some of the people in that big tent have tons and tons of cash. And because those people have tons and tons of cash, they also want to advantage themselves. Now, yes, they're more natural as a Republican in the sense of these kind of corporatists, but at the same token, they have made a nice snug home in the Democratic Party too. And they don't have to worry about some of the Christians or some of the people who they consider to be racist. Nope, they don't have to deal with any of that. They can have their lefty politics, they can have their multiculturalism, and they can still have a corporate-friendly party. A corporate-friendly party. So, yeah, of course labor is going to take a hit. They're not going to do anything that's going to adversely affect the people who are giving them cash. You have dollars or you have pitchforks. Those are the two things that are balancing on that seesaw. There are no pitchforks. People are busy working 50-hour jobs and barely making ends meet, and those people are in a bubble. There are no pitchforks. You have tons of dollars. You have Scrooge McDuck level of dollars. They lean towards the cash. It makes sense for them to lean towards the cash from a political situation, if you're being honest. If your goal was purely just gamesmanship, why wouldn't you lean towards the cash? You can make a campaign ad and lie about anything that you want in politics. You can, the way the Republicans lie about this bill. And come on, let's be honest. In that clip that I showed the other day with Sanders shaming Marco Rubio and the other guy, they didn't want to come out and say, yes, we're going to cut Social Security. But why not? Why not? That's what you have designs on doing. Why not? Why the obfuscation? I mean, it's one of those things that if you really believe in what you're doing, why don't you say it? Why don't you say it? All the stuff obfuscates. The goal of the language is to hide and to lie. This has nothing to do with you. A government that actually functions doesn't do that. You have a rogue government. What do you do to put your government back in its place? I would say it starts with a fundamental level of, I'm not supporting anybody. Beyond that, anti-corruption. Anti-corruption. And I am calling corruption also being bribed. They may call it legal bribery. What they're talking about is bribery. It is bribery. Have no doubts about it. If you're giving somebody $1 billion, do you believe that they don't know where the $1 billion came from? I mean, come on. Come on. In many of these cases, super PACs are led by the lawyers of the candidate. I mean, all of these skirt arounds in order to get these people more cash and to coordinate with these campaigns. It is a fundamentally, flagrantly corrupt system. That's what I'm getting at. What these guys say has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. What they put out is chum to be used as political debate between the two sides. They don't care about these things. They don't really believe these things. This is political culture. They do, and they lean in the way to get themselves elected. They're paid to do this. They're public relations people. That's it. If you're going to make a campaign, that campaign needs to be anti-corruption. Pillbox, I agree. The class and generation war now, French Revolution style. My government taught me the value of violence. Zax Avox. Yes, your government does teach you the beauty of violence. And you know what? That's the other part I wanted to talk about. Teddy Roosevelt made this point of, you know, at some point these people are going to revolt and these people are going to come and take what we're holding on to. They're going to realize at some point that money isn't real and that ultimately what matters is resources and access to those resources. And we've created this Ponzi scheme to give a huge amount of cash to a very small fraction of the population. It's not real. It's perceptual. You can have any world that you want, providing you're willing to live with the consequences. And the consequences of this particular world leads to a certain amount of social unrest. He was concerned about that. Now, you think to yourself, well, wait a minute, why doesn't the same hold true? It doesn't seem like that level of potential violence that Teddy Roosevelt is talking about is waiting in the wings in that sense. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's in this thing of it just needs to get bad enough. Like right now you have people kind of on this hamster wheel and they're working and everything else, they haven't put their heads up. Maybe it just needs to get bad enough. When Susan Sarandon said Donald Trump may bring on a revolution, that's clearly what Susan Sarandon was talking about. Maybe it gets so bad, he's so ghastly, that people wake up. That they wake up. You're being lied to and you're being scammed. You're being lied to and you're being scammed. Let's keep going. What really blows my mind is that Obama himself has actually called the police Republican policies. He's called his policies Republican. Yeah, he has. And Democrats are finding all over him. Why do people still think that there is a two-party system? Those people are cultural Democrats and cultural Republicans. The argument that Republicans and Democrats make, it's hard to tell where the argument comes from. Like, ultimately, a Democrat comes up and says, okay, we're going to talk about this. And the Republican says, okay, now we're talking about this. Is that really the thing that you need to talk about, though? Like, they constrain the narrative. That's my point. It's a contrived, constrained narrative. The goal of the narrative is to keep you from talking to actual real things. Like class. Like class. They're in a bubble. They're cultural Democrats and cultural Republicans. They think that the argument they're having is real. They don't see it. Don't see it, at least not yet. Got to shut down the system. Zox Avox, yes, agreed. Overwhelm the system by mass civil disobedience. It's all we can do. Pillbox, yes, agreed. I mean, the question becomes, how do you put your body on the line? And does a person put their body on the line if they have $50,000 in student debt, or if they have a wife and a kid? And that's kind of what I mean. It's almost like, what's that threshold where it's like, okay, fuck it, this is the last straw, something needs to be done, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, your state reserves the right to beat, kill, and maim you. And what happens when that state becomes completely illegitimate and completely rogue and retains that right to beat, kill, and maim you? At which point does state violence become completely illegitimate? At which point does it become illegitimate? Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt had this idea of there's a potential for something else. Now, look, this could have been just politics. He might have been lying. He might have said, there's a large mass of people who absolutely hate this, and I am going to harness that mass of people to get in office. Or I'm going to harness that mass of people. He got in office after the other president died, but I'm going to harness that for support. I don't know. I don't even care. I don't even care. He went after him. That's what matters. Good idea. If the populace as a whole refused to pay their tax until money is taken out of politics, it would force the government to clean up its act. George Papa. I don't know how you're going to pull that one off. I don't know. Look, any policy, anything that takes place, meaning any action that takes place, has to be done in mass. Has to be. There's individuals, you are weak and you will be picked off. In mass, however, there's strength. You have the majority of the population that believe these guys are bought. You have half of the population that doesn't even vote. So there's no point. There's no point. Half of the population literally says there's no point. Certainly there's discontent. Certainly there's discontent. What, 15 million people, Democrats, fled from the party? It's like, oh my God, get me out of this burning boat. Get me out of this burning boat. I don't know how you harness that. It's there. How do you harness it? It's like, how do you tap it? How do you hit that vein in that sense in order to harness that into some kind of fine point that brings out masses and masses and masses of people? That's what you would need. Reform or revolt. Tabitha Enriquez, yes. Division kills revolts. Yes, that's true. Stephen Benson, that's absolutely true. This was kind of my point of saying left and the right need to align on this. I mean, they need to align on it. Like, I mean, what's the hedge? It's like, what's anybody who's functioning with a basic level of integrity, and I tend to include lefties on this, because lefties believe in real things. Are there people of independence? Are there libertarians? Are there people across the political spectrum that looks at this and says, yes, we may disagree on some of these policy things, but at the very least, they shouldn't be corrupt. Money should have no access in this particular political system at all. It should not be corrupt. It shouldn't be corrupt. That blows my mind that that's okay. That's all. I sat down and I was like, what video do I want to do? And the thing that I think frustrates me more than anything else is the system is fundamentally corrupt. Everybody knows it's fundamentally corrupt, and everybody goes along with it, and it ticks along. All because of this idea of the other. It's like, well, I would do something if somebody else did something, which for the most part leaves you in the situation of nobody ever doing anything because nobody ever takes that first step. It's like women, it's like a guy being sexually abused. Let's flip the gender. A very strong and masculine woman, or that's not masculine woman, but a very strong and ferociously feminine woman pushes one of the guys up and sticks her tongue in his mouth and touches his private parts. And he's shattered by this experience. I don't know why, but he's shattered by this experience. He doesn't say anything. This woman is in this seat for years, for however long this goes on. She's in her 80s and she's still grabbing guys by the penis. 40 years has passed. She's been doing this for God knows how long. And one guy says, you know what? I'm saying it. I'm coming out. I'm coming out. This woman has been touching men inappropriately for 30 years. And then another one, and another one, and another one. That very first step allows the other ones a certain amount of, oh, there is another. There's another. There's another out there. I'm okay with this now. I feel like there's a certain amount of space for me to do this. I think this is the same way. Like, I honestly believe this is the same way. It's like, how do you... Because I think if you just ask random people what they believe of their government, when they take polls, that number is abysmally low. How you have a situation where 70% of the public gives you a no. They give you a no. It's like no, we don't like you. We don't think you're going in the right direction. Same thing with news media. We don't like you. We don't trust you. We think you're going in the wrong direction. There is still, there's discontent, man. There needs to be a way to harness that. Let's see, Rob, Illinois. He's talking Teddy, not Frank. Yeah, I'm talking Teddy. Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy was a trust buster. That was the one who was going after the elites in this way. Franklin was the one that did the New Deal. Died in office. They loved the guy. Got elected 3 terms. Teddy also understood the reaction of the people, even though he was more conservative than FDR, family politicians. Yeah, he was. He was a right-winger. He was a Republican. It just so happened he was on this particular way. He was progressive. Bothered, it's an understatement. Kevin, yeah. Kalita, yes, Richard Wolff said about FDR, he was smart enough to see what was happening. Yeah, he thought that they were going to take his crown. They thought, look, at that point, you had unions, you had things to the left of the Democratic Party to keep that party honest. This is kind of my point about the third party thing. Until you have something that's substantial and that can, at the very least, have the capacity to make them lose, nothing changes. You're always going to seesaw back and forth. Meaning you're always going to get a certain amount of the public that still feeds in and buys into this particular system. They go from one party to the next, back to the other party, believing that there's going to be some solution somewhere, realizing at some point there is no solution. This is Sisyphus. The goal is not to have a solution. The goal is to have status quo. You get fed up with one, you go to the other. You get fed up with the other, you go back. At some point, you just say, fuck it, I'm not voting anymore. There's a few young people who are not disenchanted by the process, and they repeat, rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. Left, right, center, anywhere along the political spectrum, if there's any level of integrity in you, at the very least we can agree that there should not be corruption in our government. That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. If you're looking for something to get behind as a platform, corruption is a damn good one. He understood the meaning of the law. Teddy, listen to Mark Christopher analyzing this law. Thank you, Jamal. We have to be smart again in our ownership and responsibility of our sovereignty. Fucking A, I love that. Bob Ramirez, here's a cynic. Sheepdog Sanders, yep, Republicans are the devil, bark, bark, fall in line, yep, get in the DNC corral, bark, bark, go back to sleep. That's a cynical bastard. That's a cynical bastard. 80 years, forget it, Augur Cybernaut. Zach Simpson, we need a new third party to tie all workers together. Yes, that is my point. Don't forget the social issues, but keep economic prosperity in the middle class as a primary goal. That is the thing that unites all of you. This Bob over here may hate my guts. He may not. Bob may be as racist as Bob wants to be. Bob may be just apathetic to all this racial stuff. Bob may not care about any other person on this planet, but he may care about his own economics. He will care about his own economics. So in the conversations that you're having, if you're talking about identity, you've lost Bob. You've lost Bob. If you're talking about economics, Bob is back on the table. Bob is agnostic towards identity. He doesn't care. You're talking economics, you're talking his language, you're talking something that directly affects him. The problem is that the big tent over here has elements in that big tent that don't allow this conversation about class. You've been under assault for the past 50 years with class. Man, it's hard to... The charts, if you get a chance to look up the charts, it is mind-blowing to see the level of wealth that takes place. And Americans have no clue on how... Most Americans don't have a clear idea on the wealth disparity that's in this nation. 95% of the top 1%. These people were pissed off. And Teddy Roosevelt was like, these people are going to have a goddamn revolution if this keeps up. It wasn't at 95%. It was not at 95%. Yeah. Great RSA video. David Harvey talks about how the American dream of home ownership was a way of tying people to a job debt so they wouldn't strike. Hey, you know, that's not crazy, by the way. Yeah, that's not crazy. And I am seeing red for some reason. Yeah, it says I'm connected. It's Quixotic course. Mr. X, nah, JT is just on his Quixotic course. I don't like Quixotic course. Just joined. Did I miss anything special? Teddy Roosevelt has his own party, the Bull Moose Party. Yes, he did. If we deal with the class issue, everyone else got lifted up, including minorities. Yes! Whatever Democrats want to say on this, race is inextricably linked to class. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, race is inextricably linked to class. Those things are not unrelated. Democrats splitting them up as if they're two things. That's politics. That's politics. That's them dealing with their funders. You know, what's well... There was there's a video with Nomika Kantz having a conversation with the woman from The Nation, and the woman from The Nation, they brought up campaign finance, and she was like, "Yeah, that's a toughie." Essentially making this point like, as long as they're on that leash what they can do is going to be constrained. That was her point. That was her point. So, yeah, that was her point. Well, what time is it? I'm going to be on a show tonight. Or what's Garden Gnome, Red Economics, and Harley Siegler. I almost missed it. I didn't forget you, Holly. I didn't forget you. I'm going to find the channel. We've been putting it out on Twitter a lot, so it should be fun. It should be interesting. That happens at 8:30. I don't know if I'm going to have another one after this. Maybe. I kind of want to do a Star Trek one. So. Mika, don't call her that. Don't call her that. She may be in the tank in this sense. That's going to be at 8:30 to be fair. It's going to be at 8:30. That should be fun. That should be fun. JT, what society now or in historic best exemplifies your ideas? Don't and never will exist. Don't and never. What society exemplifies my ideas? That's a good question. That's a good question. Here's the thing. People always, I don't know why humans do this, but there's always this drawback to the past. It's like, I'll give you an example. Just as Democrats will say, we need a New Deal. It's like, why are you going back to the 40s? Why are you going back to the 40s? Is the goal of civilization to go back to some other past civilization, or is the goal to forge and have something new, have something that actually works? I want a sustainable world. The world that I want to exist would have been impossible to exist at any point in history. That's my point. You need technology for the world I want. You have certain qualms and certain issues that you're going to have to deal with just as a human being. That is going to be labor. Who's going to do the labor? We found gross and disgusting means of getting people to do labor. Essentially, those were disposable classes. The moment that you get technology, well, that's a different ballpark. You're in a different game space. In a different game space. At that point, it just becomes an issue of doing it. Is war necessary? The answer is no. Do we have the capacity to make sure everyone has the things they need? That answer is yes. Can we automate the majority of the jobs on this planet? That answer is also yes. Can everyone have abundance? Yes. But the abundance is going to be, it can't be abundance in the way that we're talking about it now, where you're having somebody with $40 billion. No, you need a more equal distribution in your society. That's the society I want. I mean, and again, the level is like, how do you say that? It's like the technological level. Those things aren't flat values, if that makes sense. Like, there is no such thing as this is the flat value society I want. Any society that you want is going to depend upon the technology that you have access to. What can those people in that society create? What can you harness? It's not about going back to the Stone Age or going back to some kind of Native American egalitarian anarchist societal structure. No, you need something different. You need something fundamentally different. None of those things can address the problems that you're addressing. None of them can address climate change. None of them can address this thing of trying to make sure people have their needs met. You can make a case maybe in an anarchist society, but I'm making this point that you have an integrated global community. Well, the world is different. If you had to plan things today, if you had to say, what is the world that I want? That's a technical question. How do you, and that depends on you, for example. For me, I care to make sure people aren't necessarily in poverty. I want people to have their access to the things that they need. I want people to be able to grow when those people want to grow. And I want to make sure that the planet is here in 100, 1,000 years. Anything else at that point becomes a technical question. What conforms it in a way that's stable and persistent without necessarily without eating itself, if that makes sense. I've said it before, I lean more towards this idea of a Venus project. I lean towards it. I gotta be honest, there's certain things that I can't necessarily get out of my own reality box to comprehend in that project. But that being said, yeah, a fair society, get rid of poverty. I mean, if you did one thing, if you said, okay, this is way too far to the left, all right, fair enough. Get rid of poverty and make sure the planet is stable. Shut the fuck up. That's it, James E. Manitalk. That's it. That's it. That's it. What you're proposing has never existed. That's fair. That's fine. You're describing a unicorn. It has never existed and it never will. Well, you're being a psychic. You're being a psychic. And there's a lot of things that have never existed before. The internet has never existed before the internet existed. That doesn't mean anything. Nothing has existed before it existed. You understand that, right? That doesn't really mean anything. Yeah, it's James Manitou. At some point, you can say, hey, a new world has never existed. The thing is, as your technology increases, your society is going to continually get different. You understand, this society, the way we're living now, has never existed before. It has never existed before. Or ancient Rome, up to that point, ancient Rome had never existed. I'm just making the point. That's an odd line of logic. That doesn't mean anything. Now, if you're going to be, this kind of psychic, and you're going to say, well, look, I've talked to some force external to myself, and they've told me that in 1,000 years, you're still not going to have that society. Okay, I don't necessarily believe in psychics that way, but fair enough. Fair enough. All of this is choice. All of this is choice. So, at some point, somebody would choose different. Yeah, right, and the benevolent Germans were so nice to the Greeks too, yeah. I hit dislike button on accident. It was fast typing with a virus. Oh, that's fine. Jamal Thomas, unfortunately, I don't think our society will ever look like we want it in our lifetime. Not in my lifetime, no. I don't have that thought. I hope it will, but I doubt it. I have no belief that my society will look the way I think it should look in my lifetime. Zero. Your beholden technology will give 1% to head off the Richistan, and the rest of you can go and play at traffic. Richistan don't need taxes. All right, so that's fascinating, right? Augur Cybernaut, I love it when you disagree sometimes. I love it. I love it. She takes shots at me, but still, I like it. That depends on your society. That's a perspective. Like, if your society allows itself to be beaten down in this way, meaning if it allows robots to replace human beings, if it allows those jobs to be shipped overseas, if it allows all of this poverty and everything else in the country, why are you allowing it? This is kind of my point. This is literally the point of this particular talk. There are 99% of you. Why are you allowing this to take place? Augur's right. I mean, you can't get to the point where these people flee and say, okay, we got ours. Fuck them. We have a sustainable society now. We'll let those other people, be wherever they be. That's a choice, though. This is a perspective choice that you're allowing. Moment to moment to moment, you're allowing this stuff. That's all I'm saying. So, yeah, Augur Cybernaut, yes, fair enough. Fair enough. Richistan, Bill Gates City, I know. In New Zealand, I know. Maybe an amalgam of society, Japan for wildlife preservation. They're pretty good, especially considering population. Greenland for energy, all renewable power. Look, man, this is doable. This is the part that is like, oh man, it kills me. Do you have the technology? Do we as a human race have the technology to make sure that each and every person is fed and clothed? The answer is yes. Do we have the capacity to make sure there are no wars? The answer is yes. Can we eliminate poverty? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. Some of the biggest issues that face humanity, those answers are yes, they're off the table. The one thing that needs to change in that is the human element. Human beings get so stuck into what they're doing, they think that what they're doing becomes, this is just the way it's supposed to be. As if just because something has gone on for a long time, that it is the way it's supposed to be. Just because something has been in existence for a while, the time doesn't give it legitimacy. The time doesn't necessarily make it legitimate. It's like the existence of a thing doesn't necessarily make that thing legitimate in that way. So, all right, yeah, I'm going to end this. I appreciate you guys listening to me. I don't think it was a rant. I think I'm just trying to make this argument of left and right need to get their shit together. There are things that we agree on. The things that we agree on. We can bitch about the other stuff. On the things that we agree on, we should unite on those things. That's my point. Hey Jamal, did you see Jez's new video bashing the bankers? Who is Jesus? I don't know who Jesus is. It's rational for an enterprise to seek the most efficient means of production, even when it leads to job loss. Humans, yes. George Pagad, you're absolutely right. It's rational for enterprises to seek the most efficient means of production, even when it leads to job loss. Human needs to be adaptive to allow them to change industries. They don't do that. That's the most terrifying aspect of this. Your society is going through this kind of change of sorts. Yeah, they're going to ship jobs overseas. Yes, they're going to fire workers. Yes, they're going to put in robots. Because all those things, from a capitalistic standpoint, tells them, I'm supposed to maximize my profit. This is me maximize my profit. I'm not firing this worker because I'm a bad guy. I'm firing this worker because I'm a good capitalist. It just depends on how you see yourself. How do you cast yourself in this play? The reality of it is, you've gotten rid of a human being from that particular job because you wanted to make more cash. That's the honest bare bones. But the game space that the person is in says that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why when these guys get a huge amount of cash, they're not going to take that money and make jobs if they don't have a job to make for that person. That'd be insane. It's like, yes, thank you for all of this money, and now I'm going to create a job that I don't particularly need for some reason. My goal is to maximize my profit, but I'm creating a job for no reason. Yeah, they're going to put that money into the stock market. When they're talking about, look at how high the stock market has gone. That's just money going into the stock market. That's profits. They're not investing in anything else. They're investing in the stock market. It's inflating the values of the market. All right. I'm going to end this. What is it? Oh, Jeremy Corbyn. Oh, they call him Jezza. Really? The Crucible is the only way the left and the right can lock arms. We call him Jezza. Jezza. Jeremy Corbyn. I like the full name. Jeremy Corbyn. Jezza. I love it. I fucking love it. Look, it's almost as if you guys are a less right-wing version of us. Meaning, in the same way that Sanders was cheated, well, in this case, Jeremy Corbyn was able to get to the opposition. And as bad as May is having, that woman is in dire straits. As bad of a time as she's having, if there's any new election that's called, Jeremy Corbyn would trounce her, and Jeremy Corbyn would be the Prime Minister of Britain. They said that man had no chance. They said he was never be head of Labour. They said he wouldn't last. They said all of these things. There's no way that left-winger can last on us. He didn't just last, he thrived. So fucking A for Jezza. Need alternate vid streams to YouTube. That's why we have exterminate defective humans. Oh, Jeremy Chase, that's rough. That's rough. Yeah, that's funny. Corbyn is not alone. How dare you, sir? How dare you? That man is a warrior. Do this in Australia, redirecting labor with tax dollars into industries that have labor shortages. We have a capitalist society. I mean, we have a full-blown capitalist society. We don't have this. We don't have those labor protections that you guys have in Europe or Australia or in any Western nation. This is the United States. This is about exploitation. Tony fucking Blair needs to be in prison. You guys are supposed to be better than us. I can't get George Bush to locked up. You guys should at the very least have Tony Blair's ass in a cage. He's a fucking war criminal. Yeah, he's a fucking war criminal. Alright, I'm not going to bitch about Tony Blair. I've been doing a lot of stories about Britain. I think I've look, every year I've had the opportunity to travel somewhere. Like my wife and I would, well, or me, I would travel alone sometimes. But my wife and I would go somewhere. And this year I didn't get the chance to go. I got to be honest, I am itching for getting out of this country for a while. So I think I'm paying more attention to stories in like Germany and Britain and all this other stuff. But nevertheless, I'm going to end this. Thank you guys for showing up. I absolutely appreciate it. United Kingdom, not just in, yeah, United Kingdom. No, yeah, I know. Fair enough. Stiza. Promises without showing where the money comes from is loony. What do you mean without showing where the money comes from? Britain is a sovereign currency. They give tax dollars away all the time. They give inflation and everything else. There's money to be had. Look, personally, I would say you raise taxes on a certain demographic of the population, and you start raising taxes on other stuff. So, yes, marijuana is now illegal. We're going to raise tax dollars on pot, and we're going to do something fucking awesome with it. Yes, we're going to have this federal jobs guarantee where people are going to get back into the society working, and those people are going to be creating more tax dollars. Tax dollars are going to be paid back to the government. And you understand, for every job the government creates, something like $3 went back into the society itself. You can generate cash. You need to think out the box, but you can generate cash. It's not alone. You start with a fundamental level of integrity in regards to your position, and you figure the shit out as you go along. You fight for your position. That's what you do. That's what I would argue. Bob Ramirez. At least, where is it? At least Corbyn didn't bow down and kiss the ass of Satan like Bernie Sanders did. That's awesome. Zach Simpson, Jamal, I love your live streams, dude. Believe it or not, you give people a voice even with the small channel. Ah, Zach, I appreciate it. I tried to I had a hard time figuring out how I wanted to arrange my channel in this way. Like how it's like, how do you, because my wife asked me one day, she was like, if you're not taking audience questions and you're doing live stream, what's the point of you doing live stream? It was like, that's good. That's a good point. That's a good point. Why are you using this extra step if you're not going to engage with the audience and stuff? So then I was like, all right, how do I want to do this? And so I thought to myself, okay, let's steer the conversation with the debate. This is what I'm thinking at this particular moment. This is my thought on this subject and topic. And then let people have their say. Not going to be shamed. If you're having an honest perspective on it, yeah, I want you to have your say. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. And there are times where other people bring up stuff where it's like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. That's fucking awesome. So yeah, I like it when people have their say. Being earnest, however, like my caveat is earnestly having your say. You have an honest position. You're having that position. You're giving that position. I'm not going to shame you or anything else. I want you to hear your position. I want to hear it, even when you disagree with me. Augur Cybernar totally disagree with me. So did this cynical Bob Ramirez. You owe Miss JT a honeydew coupon every time you say I'm gonna end here, but don't. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. She would say that. She was like, yes, I'm gonna get a coupon every time. No, not so much. Not so much. Not so much. $5 says, he says, I'm gonna end it now again. Well, I'm gonna finish up here. I'm gonna finish up here, and I'm gonna thank everybody again for showing up. If you enjoyed the show, of course, you can share, subscribe, like. At this point, super chat, since I guess I do this live stream all the time, and of course, Patreon. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. And like I said, I will be on the other show later tonight at 8:30. I don't know if I'm going to maybe do another one. Maybe. I might be back. Thanks, guys.